Principal, episode 50, with me, Jethro Jones.
Welcome to Transformative Principal, the show where we learn every week from a leader who's making a difference, how to become better, and improve our schools. I'm your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. You can find great resources and the show notes at transformativeprincipal.com.
Here it is, episode 50. It's pretty amazing to me to think that I've been doing this for a year. I started December 1st, 2013, and here it is just about December 1st, and I have learned so much from interviewing these 29 educational leaders. 2 of them have been teachers, there's been 1 superintendent, and I've learned immensely from every single one of them. I am just amazed every day that I get to do this. It's so much fun to me. I get off these interviews and I am super giddy, and my wife just rolls her eyes and smiles because she knows that I'm doing something that I love and that it is so much fun to me. I wanted to take this time to talk a little bit about what this podcast means to me really quickly. I've said it before and I said it to my guests numerous times, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to be the best principal that I can be, and then I'm hoping that by sharing it with you, you can be the best principal that you can be. You know, I don't have all the answers. I know my guests don't have all the answers, and they'd be the first ones to tell you that they don't. But if we think about things and we hear how other people are doing things, I believe that we can find ways to adapt what they're doing and make it work for us. That's what I've been trying to do in my position as an assistant principal when I started, and as a principal now where I'm at. You know, I'm not perfect, and I'm trying my best to do the best that I can to help my teachers, and that's why I'm doing this again. What I would really like to have from you, if I can be so bold as to ask, is if you would let me know who you're interested in having be part of the podcast. Who is it that you know that is an amazing principal that you think I should interview? I've interviewed a lot of really well-known principals who have a lot of followers on Twitter and who are doing amazing things and being very public about it. And I've interviewed some leaders who are not very into Twitter at all or into social media at all, and they are doing some amazing things as well. There's something great in most leaders, and I want to draw that out and find out what we can do to help share that goodness with everyone. If you can let me know, go to transformativeprincipal.com. Give me a recommendation of who you think I should interview. I would love to be able to find some new people who you think are amazing. Believe me, I've got a huge list of people that I'm working on because I'm so impressed by so many principals every single day. Also, please follow me on Twitter, and over the last year, this podcast has reached a lot of people, and there have been a lot of downloads, and a lot of people have listened to it, and that's really meaningful to me because I know that it's impacting leaders all around the country and the world, probably. If you can do me a favor and go into iTunes and rate this podcast, that would be great. This is a very niche podcast, and I'm never going to get hundreds of thousands of downloads, and I'm totally fine with that. What I do want is to reach as many principals as possible. And when a principal learns about podcasts or starts wanting to be interested in podcasts, I hope that they can find this and learn some really great things from it. So please leave a rating in Stitcher or in iTunes. And then finally, connect with me on Twitter. Send me recommendations of who to ask and what kinds of questions you want to hear more about so that I can make this as beneficial for you as possible. This interview that is today, my assistant superintendent is doing a webinar on the Marzano framework for teacher observation, and that's what we're using, and I, so far, am really enjoying it. I think there's a lot of power in it, and it gives me a way to collect data over the course of the whole year. My assistant principal and I have done over 300 observations so far, and that's been a lot, and we've been able to give a lot of really good feedback, been able to refine our craft better over the last couple months. And what's amazing is that we've been able to get in the classroom so much, and that's awesome. And we can see what's happening, and then we can actually keep data to help our teachers see how they're progressing, what areas they need to work on, and where they're already strong. And that's been a lot of fun. This is kind of a deep conversation that's going to assume some level of knowledge of the Marzano framework. So if you're not using that, I'll put a link in the show notes so that you can get some more information about that. If you are using it, I hope that this will be beneficial. This is one part of a webinar that is an 8-part webinar. So it's a drop in the bucket. It's just a little bit of what we're doing in our district and at my school in particular, where she was asking me questions rather than me being the one asking questions. Hopefully this is enjoyable. Thank you so much for downloading. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope you enjoy this episode.
Pleasure for me this evening to introduce Jethro Jones. Jethro is our new principal at Kodiak Middle School. We have been very excited to welcome him into the work here in the district and the work that he's doing with teachers. And I guess I titled the webinar 4.5 because we're kind of doing webinar 4 and 5 at the same time. So I kind of did that. So Jethro came to us from the great state of Utah, where he had been a principal for several years and has transitioned into this work with Marzano. You had used a different system before, hadn't you, Jethro?
Yeah, we used a proprietary system. It was called JPass that the superintendent of the district had created. We had about 55 indicators that we needed to observe for every single lesson, and we needed to give feedback on each of those for every single lesson that we observed. And so that didn't have the benefit of having a walkthrough component like this framework does. It was all about the evaluation the observation evaluation that was 30 minutes long that you tracked all of these many different things on.
I think that makes me feel really glad that Dr. Marzano's framework doesn't expect a teacher to be doing all of these elements at the same time. Mm-hmm. That wouldn't be realistic, nor does it expect us as observers to kind of take all that information in. That would be pretty heavy. Yeah. So has this been an adjustment for you?
Well, it's been an adjustment to not feel so stressed to look for so many different things. So I can focus on just a couple of, and now I forgot the word for them, domains. Elements, thank mm-hmm. you. They were called indicators in my old place. So mm-hmm. look at the elements and be able to just look at a couple and spend my time focusing on those and mm-hmm. giving really good feedback to teachers about those rather than looking at a whole bunch. And the real stress was that if you had a 0 in something like reviewing content as a teacher, you felt like you were doing something wrong, when really you don't have to review content every part of every mm-hmm. single lesson. You review it when it's appropriate. And this framework allows us to look at what's important when it's happening rather than rate everything regardless of whether or not it should be happening.
Yeah. To me, this is kind of exciting because it speaks to the fact that with this new model of teacher effectiveness and educator effectiveness that is part of the transformative measures of ESEA, there's a lot of similarity in the models, mm-hmm. and we're at a point in the profession where we know what good practice is, and we can define it a little differently, but we're kind of going after the same thing. In fact, as we were talking a little bit, you said there are like some elements that you had really focused on before, so it's mm-hmm. really helped you in implementing this one.
Right. So what I feel like I have now is a framework for addressing the particular issues that I believe are most important. So, for example, managing response rates is really important because that gets to how engaged students are, and it speaks to their engagement during the lesson. And if kids are constantly answering and they don't have an opportunity to be off task or do what they shouldn't be doing, then that is really great teaching in it, and it allows the teacher also to be assessing for understanding a lot more often and know whether or not the students are actually getting what she's trying to teach. Mm-hmm, so mm-hmm. having that experience of knowing what managing response rates looks like and being able to just drop into this framework and being able to talk about that with teachers without having to learn a bunch of new things, but knowing what good teaching is and paying attention to that it makes it a lot more exciting to me, knowing that I can step in and provide good feedback to teachers right away and have it be aligned with our protocol for evaluation as well.
Yeah, that's something that is in DQ5, which we had spoken about. But again, as we'd spoken in previous webinars, DQ5 is really the gateway to all instruction. So as we spend a little bit more time here with domains 2, 3, and 4, so as folks are typing and we're looking for your responses, I would want to let you know that last year, as we started this in Kodiak, we really did not address domains 2, 3, and 4 last year. But this year, we're finding that it really creates a great balance to the direct observations of domain 1.
So you talked a little bit about balance and how looking at domains 2, 3, and 4 helps balance out some of the observations that we've been doing. And what we've seen is that we can find some areas where teachers are really excelling and have evidence for those exceptional behaviors, and note that and give them ratings that are high, that are affirming, and that help them reinforce the positive things that they've been doing, so that we can say, maybe you are struggling as a teacher in domain 1, but here in domain 3, you're identifying areas of pedagogical strength and weakness, and you're evaluating the effectiveness of individual lessons and units. And so somebody doesn't have to be an excellent teacher to be able to do that. They can be any kind of teacher, but they're showing that they're a great teacher by evaluating themselves and reflecting.
I think that as we look at domain 3, that whole reflecting piece, sometimes I've thought that was the most difficult one to address, but you were just telling me that one of your brand new teachers is really excelling at that.
Yeah, and it's just amazing because this teacher has some good teaching skills, some good foundations that are there, but as far as they show up on the observations, they're not showing through as much. What is showing through is that when I go and talk with this teacher, our conversation is about how the teacher can improve, and the teacher is constantly reflecting on how to do better and what areas to improve in and what they can do to be the best teacher for the students. And so it's easy to see that they are constantly evaluating the effectiveness of themselves and always reflecting on what they're doing. And the question of, have you thought of this? I don't need to ask that question, because it doesn't matter if they've thought of that or not, because I know that eventually they will, or they're putting things in place to make sure that they're going to do what needs to be done for their students.
Yeah. Jethro was telling me about another instance just last week, and that was in domain 4 with the professionalism piece, where some of his teachers were working together, and somebody just exhibited outstanding professionalism.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that it's easy to be negative and to focus on negative interactions with families or with other teachers. And so the collegiality and professionalism, promoting a positive environment, promoting positive interactions with colleagues, a teacher was able to take a conversation that was starting to turn negative, and they turned it around and made it very positive and focused on great outcomes and focused on what was best for kids. And there were valid concerns that the other teacher was doing, but the one teacher was going in a negative route, and this other teacher turned it around and made it into as positive as it could be without taking away those issues that are very real concerns. So they were able to bring up concerns in a very positive way and to treat their colleagues with respect, not throw anyone under the bus, all those kinds of things. And it was really great. Another teacher I saw we were talking about some new policy that we had in our district, and it's a little bit more onerous and it's a little bit more work for teachers, and they weren't really feeling super jazzed about it, to put it nicely. And this teacher said, this is the policy, this is the procedure, we need to follow it. This is how I'm following it. Perhaps you can follow it in the same way that I am, and that'll make your life easier. Or maybe it won't, but here's a suggestion to help you do better. And it was pretty amazing to see how that conversation changed when this teacher said, we're going to follow the procedure. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to do it, and here are some strategies to help make it happen. That's a great example of teacher leadership and an opportunity to give somebody strong scores in Domain 4. Now, I have to tell you, you're talking about two sides of a coin here, and I see that as a really great opportunity to give somebody a strong score. I think if I had another teacher in that same situation, that I might want to do some coaching before I would give any kind of lower score on that, because this is an opportunity kind of based thing where you're giving these scores, which is a wonderful thing. As we talk about evidence, and that's the slide that I have up here, to me, domains 2, 3, and 4 are really times that you do notice evidence in context of the work that's going on. And then when we talk about providing artifacts, one of the really great things that happened at the beginning of the year, we dropped this little practice on you that I think was kind of new for you, and That was the idea of reviewing lesson plans for teachers, because we believe that as part of the professional responsibility, we want to examine those lesson plans. And Jethro was like, what am I going to do with these lesson plans?
Well, we in my previous schools, we'd never had to turn in lesson plans as a teacher and never had to collect them as an administrator. And I just didn't know what to do, and it seemed very overwhelming to me. Not to mention, it seemed like a hoop to jump through and busy work, and I didn't want that to be the effect for my teachers. If they're going to turn in lesson plans, I want them to be meaningful and for them to receive some benefit from that. So my assistant principal and I created a lesson plan template which highlighted each of the areas in Domain 2. It made sure there was something in there about effective scaffolding of information, and then all those things going down the list. Then what we're able to do is we're able to meet with each teacher and talk about their lesson plans and go through the observation for the planning and preparing domain, and they were then able to see what it was that we were looking at, and then they could create lesson plans that met these needs here so that it was benefiting them in a positive way. And we did that one in the first quarter, and our plan is to randomly choose teachers' lesson plans to review each quarter to give them a rating in eye observation, and the intended purpose of that is not to find bad lesson plans and punish them and say, you got to do this right. But the intent is to make sure that what the actions that they're doing, are actually contributing and standing as evidence for the great things that they're doing, and for good ratings in here if they're qualifying for it. So if a teacher is not doing one of these things, so if they're not addressing the needs of English language learners, we're going to address that, and we're going to talk about that. But it doesn't have to be punitive, and it doesn't have to be punishment for them.
And Pam, I see your request to share that template, and I'm thinking that I can wrangle that out of Jethro, and we can share that. So that would be great. And I think that kind of work, as somebody plans around all of those elements in Domain 2, certainly that's going to be reflected back in Domain 1 when they implement all of that. It was interesting today too. We had professional development here in Kodiak, and we had Sandra Meredith and Hela Belhaja Moore working with us on SLOs and that whole student learning data piece. And one of the teachers today said, well, what about the work that's not academic work that we know is important? What about, and this was a high school teacher who said, what about when I work with that student who is I know they're having a substance abuse problem. Academics is not their focus. How am I going, where is that in the framework? And we had kind of a cool conversation about that, and
so it's in a couple of places. Number one, it is on domain DQ9, communicating high expectations for all students, and DQ8, establishing and maintaining effective relationships with students. Those things you can see, and I was just in a teacher's classroom last week who was
she was joking with the kids about they were sweating because they were working so hard in class. And it was this running gag that she had with them that she was teasing all the kids about whether or not they were sweating. And is that using verbal and nonverbal behaviors to indicate affection for students? It absolutely is. And it was a beautiful way for her to show her kids that she cared about them. She was paying attention to how hard they were working, and she wanted them to do their best, right? So then demonstrating value and respect for low expectancy students, number 39, that talks about being able to really get low expectancy students to be a successful part of your class. And it's not about just telling them that you care about them. It's about still requiring a high level of work from them, but also establishing a relationship with them so that they know that you care about them and that you want them to be successful. That ties into then the lesson planning, where they, on number 49, the needs of students who lack support for schooling. That then is a place where they can, in their lesson plans, talk about how they are going to help those specific kids and have that as part of their intentional planning for their classroom. That allows them to meet those kids at their level and impact them in a way that they may not have been able to otherwise if they weren't planning to do it. So that high school teacher today who asked that question, he's doing all those things. And one of the complaints we've heard is that all the great things teachers do don't show up in this. And I'd argue that we can probably find a place for just about everything that a teacher does. And then it becomes our responsibility as administrators to be able to recognize that, to find it, to comment on it, and to rate teachers on those things, even when they're not typical classroom behaviors.
I keep going back to that beginning statement that we've made about the complexity of teaching. I mean, this is incredibly complex work. Now, the third point on my little slide here talks about collecting documentation over time. And this providing artifacts, I think I would want to encourage teachers to always provide that evidence too. If I'm a teacher, and in fact there were times that I was a teacher, and I would hand things to my administrators, and that was quite a while ago. But you can do that. That's a good thing to let your administrators know what's going on, or to sit down and review that with them. That becomes a great opportunity. My encouragement would be for teachers not to see that as another thing that you have to do, but it's actually just a healthy practice. You're already doing the work. I wouldn't need for that to be cleaned up into a publish-ready format for me to submit something to my administrator.
And there are a couple teachers I know that have reflection notebooks where they reflect at the end of each day about what happened in their class, and that's powerful, when a teacher is reflecting on that, as Jerry left that comment in the chat room about asking teachers to reflect on lesson plans. That's how we get teachers to really make some powerful changes, by reflecting. And so, teachers have that, but then I also have emails and notes the teachers send to me or to each other that I find out about, and I take those and I can copy and paste those right into the comment section of that observation on any of these elements, and then have that evidence there. And I encourage my teachers to observe themselves and to rate themselves on these things, but then also to keep track of those things themselves, even if they're not rating them, so that they can provide those at the time that's appropriate. Right.
And I'm seeing the comments in the box here about lesson planning becoming a rote task, and certainly it's something that you have to get done instructionally. You have to know where you're headed, but there is nothing rote about any of the work that's going on here. So that's just kind of a great opportunity. In these elements in domains 2, 3, and 4, it's really important to examine that evidence, to look at the scale, to examine the reflection questions, the same procedures that happen in the other domains, and then also to consider the desired effect. What is the desired effect of domain 2 with the planning and preparing? The desired effect I would submit, and this is just the Davidson version, I have to tell you, is that you are prepared for that instruction and that it is effective with students. And reflecting on teaching, I mean, the desired effect is that you are engaged in thoughtful professionalism, and that goes into domain 4 as well. So those are really important things.
Can I talk about this real quick?
Absolutely.
The scales have been a source of a bit of contention at my school, because teachers have felt that a 1 means that I'm not good, right? And what the 1 really means is there's a scale for what defines a 1 on a given element, right? And one of the strategies that I did this year was I asked teachers to rate me on the Marzano leadership framework, so they could go in and they could rate me. And one teacher rated me a beginning in one area, and she came up to me afterward and said, that was really hard to do, to actually rate you as a beginning, because I felt like that would make you feel bad or hurt your feelings or make you feel like you weren't being effective. But then I read the scale, and it told me what a beginning is. And as I looked at the beginning, developing, and applying, I saw that the things that it was asking for applying was that the whole school understood this certain thing that you were doing as the principal. And I think I get that. And I think you have a plan and a vision, but you haven't done a good job of communicating it with the whole staff. And that's what's needed for a 2 or a 3. So you have to be a 1 because you haven't communicated it. But I'm pretty sure you have it, and you've shared enough with me that I have evidence that you do. And that scale, that takes it away from me personally, or from the teacher personally, and it makes it focused on the desired effect of the strategy on the students, and it makes it not about the teacher. It makes it about whether or not what the teacher's doing is effective, And so I didn't need to be upset about that teacher rating me a 1, because she was right, first of all. Second of all, it's an area where I need to grow and improve and continue to learn. And her going through that process was really powerful for her to understand what the ratings mean to her when we are following the scale, and when we're examining the reflection questions and looking at the desired effect and all those kinds of things. That makes it much more effective for her.
In fact, she reflected on that to me. She said, I totally understand, or I better understand what happens when you come in and observe me, because I had to use a scale to reflect on your practice. So that was a great move that Jethro made with his staff. Also, Jethro, as he is engaged in this work here in Kodiak, he is giving you his Twitter account.
Boom, at Jethro Jones.
Yes. And Jethro also has a podcast that you are running every week.
That's right, every week, yep. It's called Transformative Principal, and you can go to transformativeprincipal.com, and I talk to amazing principals all over the country, sometimes some teachers and sometimes other people in different roles, but it's all about learning how to be the best principal that we can be and do what is best for our teachers, and constantly focus on improving ourselves and being better. So if you want to learn from some great people, that's an awesome place to go to learn. And I'm just lucky that I get to talk to all these cool people, because they're impacting me immensely.
What a great example of your collegiality and professionalism, and reflecting on your own practice to reach out and continue to learn like that. So that's pretty exciting.
Thank you so much for downloading and listening to this podcast. Please subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher, and please feel free to give us a rating on Stitcher Radio or on iTunes, so that we can help spread the word about how much we're learning in this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones.